So I'm standing with this guava tree that in a previous video was pruned really hard off the back of the ripening and matured fruits that we enjoyed so much. And in that video, we pruned it hard to stimulate growth and stimulate fruit set, which you can see has had a really positive result on the tree. But why we are here today is to look at the next phase of getting the most out of your guava tree, and that is thinning the fruits so that you can get tennis ball sized, absolutely delicious fruit rather than a whole bunch of small ones that just kind of taste average. That's why we're here today, so stick around, and after this you will know how and why you should be thinning your guava fruit. So before we start getting into why you should actually thin your guava fruit and how to do it, let's just take a quick step back and let's look at some of the things you should not be doing when it comes to thinning your new guava fruit that is either in the process of being set or set. The first thing you do not want to be doing is thinning the flowers on your guava tree. Why? Because you don't know what the final pollination rates are going to be. Guava flowers attract a huge amount of pollinators and the bees absolutely love them, but nature is nature and you ultimately don't know what the final pollination rate is going to be, and if you remove a whole bunch of flowers, you could be reducing your final yield quite significantly. The next thing is you do not want to be thinning the fruit as soon as the flower has been pollinated. How do you know that it's been pollinated? The beautiful flower will shrivel up and dry and peel off, and you'll see there's a little skin at the bottom of the fruit, and you'll see a tiny little guava at the bottom of that flower. This is also not the right time to be thinning your fruit because you still don't know what the actual pollination is. You could still have that flower die off and the fruit behind it, but it hasn't been properly pollinated. So as soon as the flowers have been pollinated or dried up, it's also not the right time to be thinning them. Then the third one is when they are too small. Guava fruit take quite a while to start thickening up and bulking. They stay small for quite a while, and you don't want to be thinning or picking them when they are too small. Why? Because when they're small, they are still very fragile. If you walk past the tree, you brush past it, bump it, the fruits actually fall off. So if you have something like gale force winds or strong rain, maybe some hail, chances are you're going to lose quite a few of the little fruits. But that's fine. That's what guava fruits do. They overbear and overproduce to make sure that if anything happens when it comes to nature and birds, pests, anything like that, that it still has adequate fruit to reach final maturity. So don't pick them when they are too small. So what is too small? For that, we need to look at when is the right time to be thinning your guava fruit. For me, I find the sweet spot is when they are about the size of a 5 Rand coin here in South Africa, which I honestly don't know the equivalent of 5 Rands in other countries, but if you were to equate it to something more common, I would say roughly the diameter of a golf ball. You don't want it to get bigger than a golf ball because then it starts entering this phase where you're actually busy draining the tree of nutrients. So just before the size of a golf ball, it is really a good time. And why is this a good time? Because the tree has now set the fruit. If you wiggle it, you'll feel that the fruit is a lot more solid on the tree. It doesn't feel like it's just going to break off. So the fruit has properly set. You know what's going to ultimately make it through to the final ripening phase and which ones are not. So at this point, we now need to help the tree thin out what is not necessary so we can get those beautiful tennis ball size guavas that you just simply don't get in the shop. So now that we know what not to do with thinning and what to look for, let's head back to the tree and actually do it. So as I stand next to this guava tree that is absolutely loaded with little guavas, let's quickly touch on why you need to thin guava fruit and the importance of it. First of all, like I've mentioned, is to increase the size and flavor of the guavas. If you want a huge amount of guavas and you're fine with quite small ones, then this step doesn't really apply to you. But if you want nice, big, juicy, incredibly tasty guavas, then you need to make sure that you thin them. So both size and flavor. The next one, which is really, really important, is branch breakage. If you have too many guavas and they are all getting really big, the branches can very easily snap. The wood on guavas is quite brittle, so if there is too much weight, unlike peaches that can droop quite a lot, a guava tree might just snap. And the next one is pests and diseases. The more you have, the more space it takes. The more space it takes, the weaker the tree gets, sends out stress signals, brings in the pests, and you have a lot of fruit. Just working with nature to create balance is overall the best thing you can do. Overbearing trees are more inclined to suffer from pest and disease issues, so thinning is very important to maintain the balance of the tree and the overall health. Then probably the most important reason why you need to thin this fruit on your guava tree is to maintain the vigor and overall health and strength of the tree. Having a tree that is overbearing puts a lot of pressure and stress on the tree to be able to get water, nutrients, everything it needs to mature the crop. If you thin out the fruit, you allow the tree to maintain its levels it needs to be able to push out new growth after this flush has ripened off, and then possibly give you a second flush. So thinning to maintain vigor is really, really important. And then the last one is just to make harvesting easier. If you have a whole bunch of branches and a whole bunch of guavas and they're all intertwined, some at the top, some at the bottom, some are crossing, it makes it really difficult to harvest. So thinning them out into key positions so that you know where your guava fruit will be ripening does make harvesting a lot easier. I'm back at the tree, and this time it is to snip snip. But before we get there, let's once again look at what we shouldn't be doing to better understand why we should be doing it. So when it comes to thinning the fruit, what we don't want to be doing is pulling or breaking them off. Why? Because it comes down to damaging the plant. If you pull them off, yes, you can. I'm not saying you cannot do that. The preference is completely yours. I'm just saying you probably should not be doing that, because you can pull it and they can get stuck and you can tear the wood. As soon as you tear the wood, you open it up to bacteria, funguses, and all kinds of things. So it's always easier to just take one of these small-nosed pruners and just snip them off. It takes a fraction of the time, if not the same amount of time, but you are ultimately eliminating any possible damage you can cause. So now that we know what we shouldn't be doing, what should we be doing? When it comes to thinning guava fruit, we want to be removing any fruit that is on the branch pointing up. Why? As soon as it points up and it matures, it's got to somehow come down. And then the stem is going to ultimately cause the fruit to break, or it's not going to mature properly. There are a whole bunch of issues with fruit growing straight up off a branch. So that is the first cleanup you can do, which is really straightforward and easy. Anything up goes. Then anything that is touching. If at this stage, when the fruit are this small, about that size, they're already touching, you can only imagine when they are 2-3 times the size, what's going to happen. They're going to push each other out the way, and the stems that are attached are either going to break or they're going to bend in a position that they're not going to get the correct nutrients and not reach full maturity. So if they are too close together, then they also need to be removed. I like to use the principle of alternating, so I don't like to have 2 guavas at the same point, and if they are alternating and staggering, then that creates a natural spacing between the fruit, which I find is a really good principle. And then anything that is too close to the trunk, and that comes down to the harvesting, and also branches that are moving in the wind. You don't want anything that is in a V or a notch growing right in there, because It's going to chafe the fruit, scratch it, and just makes harvesting a lot more difficult. So I hope you got some real value out of watching this video. If you haven't watched the previous video of mine on pruning, I highly suggest you do that, because that's pretty much the two things you need to do with the guava tree. Prune it and thin it. Prune it, thin it, prune it, thin it. That's it. They are very hardy, they are vigorous plants, but they just need that little bit of care. So watch these two videos. It'll give you everything you need to keep your own guava tree thriving in your backyard. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please share it out to like-minded communities and fellow watchers. And if you have any questions about what I've showed you, what I've said, please drop them in the comments below. I will get back to you. And until next time, enjoy thinning your guava trees at home.